Amen. Thank you, Co-Pastor, for being up here and just talking. Y'all watch. She's just going to be praise the Lord. God is so good. Amen. I'm glad to interview this awesome woman. She's a wife, a mother, a co-pastor, and a funeral home director and owner. Come on, y'all. Yes. And we celebrate that today. So I just want to go ahead and get started. You had a very unique childhood. Can you please tell us about that?
Oh my gosh, we want to start from the...
that part, yeah.
Okay, well, one of the things that I always share with my families are the families that come to me at the funeral home. They'll look at me and they'll say, Pastor, how in the world did you ever come to have your own funeral home? You don't even look like a mortician. How did that happen? So I let them know when I was 4 years old, my father passed away. 8 months later, my mother passed. Then we ended up going with our grandmother. Grandmother died about a year after that. Then we had to go to live with our great-grandparents. My great-grandmother died not long after that. So me, my brother, and my sister, we were from home to home to home within the same family, thank the Lord. But by the time I was in the 7th grade, I literally had all of these deaths. And during a period of time with my grandmother, it wasn't such a pleasant childhood. She showed favoritism. It was very evident. But as a child, you don't really think about it. You just kind of go with the flow because it's what you're used to. But later on in life, I started looking back at that and I'm like, wow, I said that was really, it was cruel, some of the things that I would go through. I remember one time I wanted to go to church and she wouldn't let me go to church and, just all those kinds of things. So that kind of was like the beginning of my childhood. Now, fast forwarding, as I was going through what I was going through, I remember having this encounter with the Lord where he would, you want me to talk about the funeral home or you want me to just talk about the childhood part? Just the childhood, okay, just the childhood part. Yeah, so it was just a number of things going on. Like I said, favoritism was shown, and it just caused me to, really, I had a very hard child. It was very abusive. She would, it was just very abusive. But anyway, that's kind of like how it all started. But again, I didn't charge her. I remember her, I'll say this and then I'll go ahead and we'll go to the next question. I remember being in the hospital. She had to go to the hospital. And I remember being about maybe, probably 4th grade, maybe in the 4th grade. And I remember her being in the hospital, my great-grandmother at this time, she was in the hospital. And she asked me to get something out of the corner of her hospital room. And it was she said, it's a bureau. Go in that bureau and get this and that and the other. Well, she was hallucinating. There was nothing there. And she said, I wish I had me a switch. I'd tear you up. That was her response to me. And I was like, Grandma, I said, there's nothing there, And she just kept saying, I wish I will beat you and this kind of thing. So, we went ahead and we left out the room. And something was inside of me to go back and give her a kiss. So I ran back and I gave her a kiss on the cheek, and I went on back with my other family members that left. But that's how it was. But again, I didn't charge her because it was just, I was so used to the abuse. You know what I mean? So that's how my childhood kind of was.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I didn't say this question, but I'm asking. Considering that you got to God, you got salvation, was by the time you got saved and the experience of your childhood, was there anything about you that just thought God was at fault for all the things that you were experiencing, like the death and the mistreatment from your family? Did anything about that deter you from the Lord?
Actually, it had not. I didn't even really know. There was a time I was in the kitchen with my mom. Vet is my mom, the one that raised me. I call her mom. She was in there talking to my cousin, Jeff Butler. He was a minister at this time. And I remember us all sitting at the table. And I remember Jeff talking to Mommy about salvation. I had never heard of salvation. We were not a family that went to church at all. So I didn't know about God. I heard of him, but I didn't really know him at all. But I remember that was my first encounter with hearing about this God. And I was at the table, and Jeff was talking to Mommy. And back in the day, when grown folks were talking, you weren't supposed to talk, especially children. So I was sitting there, and I was like listening at the conversation, and he was talking about God and what God will do. He was talking about salvation. He was talking about making heaven and all that. And I was thinking to myself, he said you had to be saved in order to make heaven. So I'm thinking to myself, I said, well, what about those kids that are over in like Ethiopia, the places, the poor countries? I said, so they're not going to be able to go to heaven if nobody hears, if they don't hear about salvation and all that. And I wanted to ask him so bad, but we were taught, do not speak when grown folks are talking. So I said to myself, I said, God, I said, if you're real, I said, can you tell him, let him know that I have a question, so I can ask the question. And then no sooner than I said that, he stopped and he looked at me. He said, you have a question, don't you? I said, how did you know? So it was at that point that I realized that God must be God, because he heard the innocence of a child's prayer. Not knowing that it was prayer at that time, I just knew that, I heard that he will hear you. So that was my first encounter to realize that God really is real and really can hear. So
what, after that, how did you end up getting saved, or what led you to your salvation?
Okay, when I was, I never heard about baptism or nothing like that until I met my husband's father. Okay, my husband and I, we met when I was 17 years old. We dated for a year, we got married when I was 18. And I remember going to his father's house, his parents' house, and his father started talking about the plan of salvation in depth. And see, I'm 17 years old, so I'm curious at that time. When you're a child, you really don't know. So he was talking about the plan of salvation, talking about baptism and all that kind of thing. And that was when I first heard about it. And I remember going through something in my health, my thyroid. I had a thyroid condition. And I remember going to the house, and I was they had given some bad news about this thyroid. So I went in the back room, and I was just crying. I was really upset because my mother, she died of a thyroid condition. So I'm thinking, here I am, 23 years old, I think I was at the time, and I'm thinking, same thing is going to happen to me that happened to her. So I was really upset, and Dad came in the room, and he said, daughter, he said, that's why, he said, what's wrong? And I began to share with him what's wrong. He said, that's why you need to get saved. And I got inwardly offended, because I'm thinking, you're saying that I have this thyroid condition because I'm not saved. Like God did that because of that. And like I said, I got offended, but I never disrespected him, and I never even shared it with him. So I'm still going on, and in life, I didn't really pay too much attention to that. But the next time I had this big thing that happened in my life that was devastating. I remember what Dad had talked about all these years, and I remember him talking about God and being baptized, and I remember him talking about the Holy Ghost and all of that. And I said, you know what? I called him one day, and I said, Dad, I'm ready to get baptized. And he said, what? He said, you ready to get baptized? He said, okay. He said, come on down. So we went into the church, and he talked about baptism, and he talked about receiving the Holy Ghost, because at that time, I knew that I was going through so much that I needed something other than myself. I needed something other than the people that were around me. So that was my indicator. I said, okay, I've got to try something more powerful than I am. Not thinking about it in them terms, but now I'm looking back, that's exactly what it was. So I remember going through what I was going through, and then, I got baptized, I went on home, and I went on my knees, and Dad said that I would receive the Holy Ghost. So I was down on my knees, and I was praying to God, and all I knew was call on Jesus. Jesus, 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 tearing from the Holy Ghost, that's all I knew. So I was down there, and I was calling on Jesus' name, and I got offended after about maybe 15 minutes again. And I said, Dad said I was going to get the Holy Ghost. I said, I don't feel nothing different. So I got up and I left. And I went on back to Easton, okay? I got halfway there, and then I was driving in my Jeep, and I said, you know what? I said, I know everything is going to be okay. It wasn't within me. It was like something down. It wasn't me. It was something within me that said, I know everything is going to be okay. And then I started speaking in this other language. And I thought it sounded like Spanish. That's what it was to me. And then my body just started shaking, and I'm like, oh my God. I said, I know what this is. I know what this is, And I got really excited when it started happening, because God said, the word said, I shall receive the Holy Ghost. So, and as I was talking, it started getting real more prevalent. It started getting real, I was like, oh Lord, I said, this is happening. I just felt like God just came in and just sat right with me in my truck, okay? So as I'm sitting in there, I was trying to think of every single thing, because I knew God was there. I knew he was there at that moment. because it was so supernatural. It was nothing other than God. So I said, I was trying to think of my husband, and I was trying to think of my siblings, and I was trying to think of every possible thing that I could talk to God about at that moment. Even though it wasn't in my natural voice, it was in my mind. So I was just trying to harness the moment, okay? So then I got from Preston to Easton, I was speaking. And then I could start hearing English language in the midst of that tongues. And I'm like, Lord, no, please don't leave me. Please don't leave me. God, don't leave me. I need you. Because I thought he was leaving me. I thought he was going away because I could now hear my own, my language. You know, and then when I said, please don't leave me, he fell on me again. And I was like, oh, Lord, and I was speaking in tongues from the time there to the time I got to my destination. And I'm telling you, I was all smiles after that. I was going to Dad's house, and I wanted to tell him that I received the Holy Ghost. So naturally, he was excited, you know. And by the time I got back to Federalsburg, I was speaking to people I didn't like. Okay, so my husband and I, once we had our son, I was thinking about, I said, well, who in the world can I get to babysit? Because we're very particular. We only had the one son, and we wanted somebody, you know, every parent knows how it is when you have a child. You wanted somebody, you know, right. So it just so happened I was told about her mom, Miss Van. And so she was actually going to my church at the time, Bishop Friend's church. And I didn't know her because the church was so big with so many people, and I kind of stayed to myself, so I didn't know who she was. But so I met Pastor there. She would always be there. Like I would go pick up CJ, and I would see her car there, and I would get real excited. I'm like, yes. I said, she's here. I said, because I knew that it was something in me. Well, first of all, to back up just a little bit, I remember having these experiences after my salvation walk. I remember having these dreams, and I remember having visions and all of that. And I knew that I couldn't talk to people about it because people would think you're crazy. They would think, you know, all this and that and the other. And I prayed for God. I said, God, I need a mentor. I need somebody that can help me with what I'm going through, you know. So, and when she was there, it seemed like she had conversation. I remember sharing with her one incident, one vision or something, and I saw the look on her face, and it was like one of pleasure. And when I saw that, I said, she knows what I'm talking about. I can identify, I can talk with her. And so every time she was there, I would get real excited or what have you. And then, so that's where that thing began, you know, meeting her and feeling what I felt when I was around her, you know, so.
So was that another church that you actually crossed paths with Pastor Ellison?
I'm sorry, what was that?
It was at another church through her mother. That's how you crossed paths with.
At her mother's house, because she babysitted for me.
Okay.
Her mom was the babysitter, so she was always at her mom's house when I come pick up my son. Yeah.
Okay. So once your Pastor Ellison has already started having services, and then she just calls you up. What was that like? Did you already have an inkling that you had something in you, and she just called you and asked you to?
Not at all. Not at all. No, I wanted to sit back there. That's why I was comfortable. But to be honest with you, the reason why I wanted to sit back there, because I knew if I was back there, then I wouldn't have to be accountable. If I sat back there, I knew I wouldn't have to be committed. I could come if I wanted to. Really. But the closer I got to the pulpit, which I really didn't think that I didn't know anything, you know. So I'm like, why, you know. But yeah, so I didn't know.
I mean, you hit something real heavy about the accountability piece, especially with the role you have now. I don't want to get ahead of myself. So as you're serving with Pastor Ellison, you end up developing to being elder passion as we know you, and then you have the gift of dream interpretation. Can you tell us how that even came to be, how you knew how that happened? Okay, as far as the ordination, I'll say this. I remember I was in my prayer closet. Pastor had did Bible study one evening, and one of the things that she said that nobody has ever said, and that was, ask God what he wants you to do. And I'm like, yeah, we all have something to do. And I never even consider asking God what he wants me to do. So I did.
I asked God, what do you want me to do? And I went in my prayer closet. I was in my prayer closet, and I asked him, I said, Lord, what do you want me to do? Whatever you want me to do, I'll do. And I heard him very clearly. I heard him very plain. He said, assistant pastor. And I was like, no, that's not right. That didn't make sense to me. And so I'm still kind of like, well, we'll go there in a minute. Kind of like, again, he said it again, and like a third time. And I'm like, assistant pastor. I said, well, Lord, I can't tell her that. I said, Lord, can you tell her? And let her come and tell me. And then when she comes and tells me, then I'll know that it was you. Just the innocency. The innocency of the request. Because I didn't know anything else. And so I remember we had church one Sunday, and when we were sitting up there, I was doing the books, and I was doing the, some of the paperwork at the church. And as we were doing that, Pastor said, okay, she said, well, I'm going to have to ordain you, the assistant pastor. And I'm still writing on the paper. And I said, what made you say that? And she said, I don't know. She said, I'm just going to have to, install you and ordain you. And I was like, oh my God. So I didn't say anything to her at that time. One day I went to go pick up my son. And I asked Pastor if she could come out and talk to me in my truck. And she did. She came out, and I said, Pastor, and I told her the experience that I had when God called me to assistant pastor. Of course, she was excited because it was confirmation, But that's how that came to be. It was another question you had. Okay. I remember Pastor and I had a conversation one time. She was telling me about this dream because I didn't know there was even such a gift, because I wasn't well versed in the Bible or anything like that. I was still learning, But I remember she telling me that, she said, co-pastor, oh no, she was calling me elder at that time. She said, elder, she said, I remember having this dream. And she said, in this dream, it was this money just coming and dropping down, and I was just trying to grab it, and it was so much, And then the next thing out of my mouth was, I will pour you out a blessing you don't have room enough to receive. And then that's when I knew it comes like that. It wasn't within my mind, it just came out. There was a knowing. So that began me realizing that God is telling me, he's giving me revelation sometime right at the moment. And then sometimes he'll tell me, I'll be in my prayer closet, and he'll tell me, ask me about this dream. Ask me about that dream, or whatever. So that's how the dream interpretation, the real revelation that I had that came.
Now, how do you know that was actually a gifting and him not using you just for that moment? Or maybe if he used you consecutive, how did you know that it was actually something that he was assigning you to be, opposed to it just being a once or twice?
I never even thought about it at all. I'm just literally going on in ministry, and then it was just happening. People would share this, and then he would say this. So I didn't even think about it in terms of a gift like that, like a permanent gift, if you will. I never thought about it like that.
And see, with you working so closely with Pastor Ellison, and it's very uncommon. I don't think I know any other ministry where there's two female leaders. How do you and Pastor Ellison get along where you have your gift and she has hers, and there's no, or is there any conflict, or have you ever, either been intimidated, or like, maybe I shouldn't say that. How do you work so well with having another a leader as a female?
Well, first of all, she's my pastor. She is my pastor. I prayed for her, and God gave me her. So I'm gladly following her.
Did you ever go to her and say, I believe God has put this in me, as far as even doing dream interpretation? Did you ever go to her and say, I'm starting to realize this is a gift God put in me? Did you ever have a moment like that?
No, I do remember a conversation we had. I had this dream where I had given birth. I was in this hospital room, and I had given birth to this head, just the head of a baby, like a baby doll, like the head. And I remember over in the side room, it was like a microwave, and that's where the body was. The body was over there getting ready, in this microwave. And then in the dream, I saw where the head and the body came together. It was like almost like you pop a doll baby on the head of the body. It was that, and I shared that with her. And she said, "You in the right place, you in the right place." So she knew what that dream, she knew what the interpretation was. I had given birth, I was a head, and the body was getting ready, which was international, and we came together. So God gave her that dream, that interpretation, and she shared it with me. So she notified, she was able to see the gift in there herself. So I didn't have to come and tell her. And it was another thing she said that what I didn't think about is she said, because you operate in the office of a prophet. I never thought about that. I'm just doing what God did say and going where He go. I didn't put terms or titles to it or anything like that. So yeah, she recognized it and shared it with me. And as far as us working together, like I said, she's my pastor. I follow her gladly because I know that I would not be where I am. It's not that I'm looking for. I wasn't looking for position. I wasn't looking for title. I just knew what I felt when I was around her. So I knew it was the perfect fit, and I knew I was in the right place. So I'm going to follow you. I'm going to follow her. Wherever. As she follows God, I'll follow her.
So even considering the fact that you have such a gift that we hear of people starting churches that they have these type of gifts. How do you handle accountability and keep even the people in respect of that's still pastor, your co-pastor, and just keeping everything balanced? How do you still serve and making sure that everything's, because sometimes people can come and be a little out of pocket and come and say, well, I ain't going to her, I'm coming to you. So how do you keep and help make sure that everything stays in order?
Yeah, the funny thing about it is, Pastor and I, we realized early on that we were doing like the same things at the same time. Literally, I remember going to Pastor Viola's house one day. We were going to Salisbury, Pastor and I, and Pastor was driving, I was on the passenger side, and we'll start humming and hitting the thing at the same time, hitting the seat or whatever. Just little things like that. Like, there we go. And we might say something at the same time, or we might do something. It was always symmetry there. Okay, and then we realized that going forward, if one of the babies, they might come to me, one of the members or what have you, they might come to me, and they might go to pastor another day or what have you, and come to find out we've been given the same counsel. We always give the same counsel. Not that we planned it, because it's not that we had conversations together and then, disperse. It was always like that. It was always together. So it was never, it's not like they can come to Passion because Passion going to be easy. And then, it's nothing like that at all. Yeah.
Do you believe that accountability, regardless of what you're operating in, do you believe that now that in serving within ministry, you believe accountability is important?
Absolutely. It's paramount. If you want to get where God called you to be, you have to be accountable. You will never, ever reach the place of greatness that God called you to be if you're not accountable and if you're not committed.
I think I posed a question to you written. I asked you about as far as your gift. Did you ever interpret wrong?
No, I never interpret wrong because I don't interpret.
Well, there it is. And we thank God. And do you believe it's just because of your reliance on God?
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely it's Him. And one of the things that I prayed for from the beginning, I said, Lord, whatever I say, be it good or be it hard, let me not get the credit for either of it. So if I can't get the credit, they know it's God. Yeah.
So I want to go a little bit further in your journey. As you're serving in ministry, God ends up switching you up, your livelihood, your whole direction in what you do in the business world. How in the world did you become a funeral director, or when did God supposed to be?
Kind of like he did when he had mentioned about assistant pastor. I was in my prayer closet again. As a matter of fact, well, of course, you all know about my history of having to go through all these deaths by the time I was in the 7th grade. And then in 2002, I was working at the bank. And as I'm working at the bank, I was typing, and my finger just started moving by itself. And I'm like, why in the world is my finger moving? So I called my husband. I said, Calvin, I'm going to take myself to the hospital because something is not right. So I went on to the hospital. And my family had actually ended up taking me because on the way there, I started talking to the Lord. My time in my car is my time with the Lord. We're just enjoying each other's company. That's just what we do. So as I'm talking with the Lord, I got halfway there, and my speech starts to change. It wasn't tongues this time. It was like a labored talking. you know. And so I called my family and I told them, and they came to get me, take me the rest of the way. So when I got there to the hospital, my whole body was shaking like my finger was. And my speech hadn't gotten any better, so they went ahead and took me to Johns Hopkins over in Baltimore. And as I was at Johns Hopkins, they diagnosed me with a condition called essential tremor, which looks exactly like Parkinson's disease. So I'm in my prayer, so I go to my prayer calls about the 4 or 5 o'clock hour in the morning, and I'll say, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do now? Because again, I tell all my families, when something major happens in your life, God's always shifting you. It's always something else he's doing. A lot of times people get stuck right there. When something major happens, they can't figure out what God is doing, so they start questioning him, they start backing up, they start going through a whole lot of different things. That wasn't my story, because I know all things work together for good. I know that, so I'm okay with all of it. All I needed to know is, now, Lord, that this has happened, what's my next step? What do you want me to do now? And then that's when I heard him very clear, and I heard him very plain. He said, mortuary science. And again, I'm thinking, that can't be right. I did not, because I was scared of bodies, I was scared of the funeral homes. So, as a matter of fact, on that main street, one of the people, my mom, that used to live, we used to live on 302 South Main Street. Okay, when we used to go across the tracks to shoot hoops and play ball after school, we used to walk across there. I would not even walk on the side of the street, which was across the street. I would not walk on the side of the street because it was a funeral home there, 311 South Main Street. I was scared to walk in by the building. Now I own the building. So that's what I'm saying. That's why it didn't make sense to me. I share that with you, not for bragging or boasting, nothing like that. But so when God said mortuary science, when y'all know I'm scared of the building. So that's why I said it didn't make sense to me. But I heard him clear. I heard him very plain. He said mortuary science. I said, Lord, are you sure that's what you want me to do? And he said, why do you doubt? I said, Lord, no, I'm not doubting you. I want to make sure I'm hearing you right, because that's my purpose in life, to do the will of God who sent me here. So I just want to know what you want me to do, how you want me to do it, so I can do it. And this is what he said to me. He said, it's not about those that pass, but those that yet remain. God let me know that he was raising me up to put me in such a position so I can minister to my families that he's sending to me, so I can let them know you can make it even though mama's gone. You can make it even though daddy's gone. Then it started to make sense why I had to suffer all the deaths that I had to suffer. Because God was going to use me in this business ministry to be here for my families. See how he does it? See how he does it?
And I recall one time you were teaching a Bible study and you were talking about that God gives you an indication of who you are in your childhood or throughout your life. Do you believe that what you went through was, well, clearly it was an indication, but how do we slow down to make sure that we're not missing those kind of cues? And when God spoke to you, you clearly had to take a moment to make sure that you heard him. So how do, in life, when certain things like that happen, how do we make sure that we are prepared to hear God? You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things in that to answer that question. The first thing is, like, how do I know? How did I know that was? Say that again.
Like I'm saying, in your transition, how did you know that when God spoke to you to do the mortuary science? How did you know? Like you talked about being where you get the major transitions happening in your life. How did you know that you were being called into that? And then you were talking about that when a major thing happens in your life, that was God shifting you. So how, when things happen like that, because sometimes it can be hard to distinguish between the trial, am I going through this because it's a trial, or is God redirecting me? So what was going on in your life that you were able to stop and know that it was God actually redirecting you? You know?
Okay, so one thing for sure, I know that I was doing everything possible that I could do for the Lord. I wasn't backing up, I wasn't slowing up, I was completely obedient as far as I knew. Okay, so when you have an individual who is completely doing everything God called them to do, the way they call them to do it, you don't have to worry about when trials come. You never have to worry about it, because you know that you're in the vein that he called you. So when you're doing everything that you can do to obey him and follow his plan, you don't have to worry about it. Now then, because sometimes people go out on their own and they mess up and they encounter a trial. When they encounter a trial, it's at that time that they have to say, okay, Lord, am I being redirected because it's your plan, or am I being redirected because I'm in a place that I'm not supposed to be in? There's a difference. You know what I'm saying? The Bible talks about how with every act of disobedience comes punishment, or for every act of sin, there's punishment. You know, so you have somebody over here that's disobedient to God, what God called them to do, and then when they start having trials and tests and tribulation, they have to check themselves. They have to check their walk. You know, and with me, I knew that I was doing everything that I could to please the Lord. You know, I literally was asking him, Lord, okay, what do you want me to go here today? You want me to go there today? Everything. So when that situation happened, I knew that it was okay. You know, I knew that it wasn't to my detriment. I knew that it was to redirect me, you know. And it was something else that you said a while ago about, but that'll probably come back to me in a moment. I'll address that then.
And you were still serving as a co-pastor when God called you into this. How did you know you weren't supposed to put that aside and go pursue being a funeral, director and all that full time?
Well, first of all, I had a conversation with Pastor. I kept her in the loop about it all. And she believed in the God in me. That's another thing. She believed in the God in me. And so when I told her that, she was excited about it and everything like that. So everything, my plate was so full. Because going to mortuary school, it's a 2-year program after you have your other prerequisites. A 2-year program, and it was intense because I had to go to Baltimore every single day. You know, from Monday through Thursday, actually, I had to go to Baltimore, and it was in the evening that I had to go. So I remember her, telling her, I won't be able to make Bible study because I'll be in classes and different things like that. And she gave me her blessing. You know, it was never like, well, you can't do this or you can't do that. But again, but I still was preaching. So I still had other things to do. And I remember being in classes, and the classes are so intense. By the time you graduate mortuary school, you wouldn't know as much as a pre-med student. So you can imagine the information that they give you in those 2 years, so it was really intense. So I remember going to Easton to the church that we were in, and I remember getting on the altar. I was by myself. It was during a weekday. And I remember talking with the Lord. I was like, Lord, I got to preach, and I got this class coming, I got this and that and the other. And literally, that began my process of having to depend on him with every single moment of my time. That's the only way it could be done. But I thank God for that, because I would not be able to acknowledge him in all my ways now for him to direct my path. But that's where it all began, having all of that on me and not letting anything go, not letting anything slack. Now,
because we know that, you have a busy plate, and I'm just thinking about sometimes how people can fill their plate up with business, but how do you know that you have the grace for that and you're not just putting too much on your plate and overwhelming yourself, and then you're not really good for anybody?
Mm-hmm. One of the things that the Lord will do, he will give you grace for the journey. Anything that he calls you to do, he will give you the grace for it. You will not feel overwhelmed. You will not feel burdened. Now, granted, it may be a lot, because at the times, I know, maybe in 1 week, I remember you asked me about how many people that I have at one time at the funeral home. And there may be 8 families that I'm dealing with in 1 week. Now, I'm doing everything, but it's not overwhelming, not at all. Why? Because he gave me the grace for it. Now, any time that I start feeling like, oh my God, I can't, it's overwhelming, then I've stepped into something that I'm not supposed to be in. So God will call you away from a thing. Now this is my lot in life right now, to own my own funeral home and this and that and the other. The moment it feels heavy, then that's when he's going to start transitioning and changing. But right now, he will give you the grace for it. Yeah.
I want to go back to when you knew God was calling you to transition, for adding this, I should say, to your life. What would happen, or if there's a person that knows God has called them into something, but the leader is not in agreement with it? How do you deal with that kind of stuff?
If that would have happened, thank God I haven't had that issue. But I did have somebody ask me that question. First of all, God is well able to do anything, right? The individual had came to me because she believed that her pastor wasn't really in the vein that she was supposed to be in. And I told her, I said, what you do, you pray, you fast, and let God handle it. God knows what to do. He can change your mind in a moment. So go ahead and pray about it and let God deal with the individual, deal with the situation, and then trust him to act. A lot of times what people do, they will pray, and because they don't see what they're thinking God should do, then they get discouraged and thinking that the prayer isn't working. No, it's not like that. You know, especially if God called you to that ministry. You know, and then some people, those things that happen, your feathers that get ruffled because it's not even where He called you to in the first place. You know, so that's something you need to evaluate yourself. You know. Yeah.
So there's a difference between getting upset because you're not in the right place versus the leader kind of helping you to be on the right track. There's a difference between that and upset. Okay.
That's the difference.
Like I said, you serve. You're at this point. You have gone through mortuary school and all that, and then you end up opening your own funeral home. How did that come to be?
Okay, that came to be about. I remember. I'm trying to think. I remember driving on Main Street, and I love real estate. Everybody know me know I love real estate. So I'm driving up, and I'm looking for a building that I can have my funeral home in. And I'm like, Lord, again, being the Lord just on. I was driving around Fellows,burg, and I said, Lord, where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do? And I looked at this place, this little storefront, and I'm thinking that could work or whatever. And then I rode by the building where I'm at now, and the Lord said, pull in there. So I pulled in there in the driveway, and I went in there, and the owner of the funeral home, Torbert Williamson, he was in there, and I asked him, I said, because he had a lot of real estate, and I'm thinking perhaps he had a building that I could rent, you know, for my funeral home. And I asked him, I said, well, by any chance do you have any places, you know, for rent, commercial places that I could rent? And he said, no. He said, I don't have any right now. I said, or perhaps this building, you know, can I share this building, rent this funeral home with you? And he said, yeah. I'm like, okay. And he said, and I gave him my story about what, you know, what happened at the other place that I was at, why the doors shut there, and then why I wanted to keep on moving. And he said, okay. I said, well, okay. I said, well, and then that started the process. And then, so we had developed such a relationship that he considered me and my husband like his children, you know. And then it got to the point where his health was failing. And as his health was failing, he had his own funeral, like I said, his funeral home. So my husband and I would help him in his funeral home because he didn't have anybody, really. He didn't have a lot of business, but yet when he did have, we would just do everything for him because he had strokes and all that kind of thing. And as he was declining, the Lord was raising us up. Yeah, so God had me go in there just in the time to help him, and the rest is history because we have the building now.
And so also by this time, the church had also transitioned to Federalsburg as well, right?
Yes.
Because you also started off in Easton, but everything had transitioned, well, not everything, but mostly had transitioned this way as well.
That's right.
This was my final question, but I'm going to ask it now. You talked about your journey of getting to international, but do you think with you having gifts, and you certainly have a lot of God-given ability, you own your own business, do you believe that being connected to a leader and the appropriate ministry helped to push you where you are today?
Absolutely. I would not be here had it not been for that. I didn't even think about I remember asking Pastor one time, because we were together for a lot of, we were together a lot in ministry. I'm talking about even off, not just Sundays. You know, I would go over there, we would ride over at Salisbury to Pastor Violet's house. I remember asking Pastor, I said, well, how do you hear God? I used to hear her talk, and Pastor Violet talk about, you know, hearing God. And I remember being over, so we went to Salisbury one time to Pastor Violet's house. And I was saying, well, how do you hear God? I didn't understand that, you know. And Pastor Violet said, well, you just got to ask him. And I said, well, I did. She said, well, honey, you just ain't listening. I said, well, I am listening, and I just didn't know. I mean, they talk like they hear him just like, you know, you and I long for that, you know. And again, being with them like that, it was like, then that's when I began to be curious and push a little bit more, because I knew that God could talk like that. So if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be able to hear him in my prayer closet. I wouldn't even went in my prayer closet and ask him, what do you want me to do? Because remember, that was at Bible study. She said, ask God what you want. You know, so things like that. I would not be where I'm at had I not have been obedient to where God called me.
And then how are you managing because you're married, you have a son, you're a co-pastor, and you have your own funeral home. So how are you managing to make sure that all areas get the proper attention, and that, you know, you'll know some days that maybe you need to spend more time here than there. Plus you have to, as just a believer, as a child of God, you simply have to grow just for yourself. And you have to stay in the Word. So how are you making sure that with all that you have going on, that you give God what he deserves?
One thing I do that is paramount, he gets my morning. My prayer time is non-negotiable. I go in my prayer closet, like I said, 4 or 5 o'clock hour, that's a given. Now, granted, like say sometimes I might, go out on a death call or something like that. I might not get home until like 2 in the morning. Well, that may change a little bit, but for the most part, 4 or 5 o'clock hour in the morning, I go in my prayer closet, and that sets the stage for the rest of the day. Okay, my time in the Word, it doesn't change, Now, it might change in the time of day. Say my husband and I, we have to go to Baltimore for this or that or the other. Well, he does all the driving. Well, that's time I can get in the Word, Or maybe right at the end of the day, I'll get in the Word, And literally, it's acknowledging Him in all of my ways so that He can really direct my path. And when I say acknowledging Him, I'm talking about, Lord, okay, what do you want me to do right now? Do you want me to do this or do you want me to do that? And get into the habit of doing that. And that's literally what's keeping me, keeping everything in order. Yeah, because that's what and then having management and systems in place. You had asked me about like how I do what I do at the funeral home, because everybody knows I do my own embalming. I don't hire nobody to do, I do it myself, whereas, my husband, he helps me, like do the cleanup, or he helps me, whatever the case is. So he'll have all my instruments prepared and all that kind of stuff. So that's a system that I've put in place. I'll go in there and do what I need to do, scrub up or what have you, then go and he'll clean up or whatever the case is. So being able to have those things in place gives me the opportunity to do whatever else I need to do. You know what I mean? So that I would say that's what it is, having systems in place, first of all, acknowledging God, and everything will go smoothly. Mm-hmm.
Now, how is it, you have your son, you have your husband, you had such major transitions in your life, so how was that and keeping your marriage, the relationship there with your son? You went from, being a banker, you're a co-pastor, so in all those transitions, I guess more or less, how did that affect your family life, with the development of your life?
Well, it's been a blessing, really, it has. I remember I was talking with my son. I used to be real strict on him from the very beginning. All right, and when I say strict, not necessarily beaten and all that kind of thing, although he gets it, he would get it. I'm not saying that, but but I would be like, everything I say, I expect it to look like what I say. Okay, so if I tell you to clean your room, I expect you to start walking in that direction the moment I say it. Okay, so that's what I just expect. And I remember, if he could go outside, I'll say, okay, I don't want you beyond this second house in the neighborhood. I'll go out there and I'll say maybe he's at the third house down the road or what have you. And that's not what I called for. So I would call him in and I would tell, and he would get a talking to. It would be something that he would be reprimanded some kind of way. And then I remember hearing God, he tell me, let me say, I remember telling God, he said, you're a parent, not a drill instructor. And I was like, okay, so I got in trouble. And I'm okay with it, because I'm learning too, and the reason why I was so strict is because I had always thought, if my son doesn't obey me, who he can see, he won't obey God, who he can't see. And I had to make sure he listened and acknowledged and knows the importance of authority, because I'm training him to follow God. So that's why I was so stern. I got to make sure you obey everything I say, So God had to teach me to be a parent, okay? Same thing with being a wife. God had to teach me, to be the wife. And in every other capacity, and again, I'm asking what to do, how to do, literally. Because we don't come knowing everything. We need, and this is what he wants. He wants us to depend on him. He wants us to rely on him. And that's what I do. Some people just ignore God when it comes to certain situations. But that's how it is. And everything works out together because like my husband and I, we get to, we're working together. We don't get tired of one another. We love what we do. So we spend time together. It's not like sometimes, people working and they're away from the home. We're together doing what we're doing. So, yeah.
I wanted to, I'm kind of nearing the end of my questions, but I wanted you to talk about the illness you got and how God completely healed you from that. Please testify to that.
Yeah, I was, as all you all had know, I had was diagnosed with essential tremor. Again, it looks just like Parkinson's. Most people are familiar with Parkinson's disease. So now y'all have a visual of what I was going through. And I remember sometimes we would have two services, and after about the middle of the first service on the Sunday, Brother Tommy, he could tell you, I was going through physically. I remember times where they had to kind of take me downstairs, so I could go out and go home. My whole body was shaking and stiff and all of that. And so I remember. Like I said, I wouldn't be able to go to two services because the second service would just do me in. Sometimes the first service would do me in. So I remember not long ago, I was at the funeral home, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm having 2 funerals in a day, leaving one funeral, going to the other funeral, then we got like this going on, that going on. And I'm like, wait a minute, I said I wouldn't be able to do this before time. And it wasn't until I realized that God had totally healed me of the condition. So what happened was the Lord allowed that sickness. He allowed that sickness to be upon me just enough to bring me to take me away from corporate America, to set me in my purpose. That's what he did.
So like what you're saying is making me think about how sometimes we can misinterpret the ugly in our life, because the ugly can do the thing to move you where you need to be.
Absolutely.
One more question is that you work here with Pastor. I want you to end in the ministry. I want you to talk about, if you can, just watching the ministry grow and how you've grown kind of in synchronization with it, but watching the ministry move forward and what that really has done for you in your relationship with God, if you can.
Oh my God, it has been such a blessing. I remember the 7 people that started at Pastor's house. We had a prayer. She said the Lord had opened her, had told her to have prayer in her house. And I remember it was on the Saturdays, but maybe about the 7 o'clock hour, and I couldn't wait to get there. It was about, like I said, a group of about 7 of us there. And I was so excited because we would talk about the Lord. Well, it wasn't long, maybe about an hour, we were all together. And it was just so exciting. And I remember her talk, she was getting ready to get to church, and I was out looking for buildings, because again, I love real estate. So we were sitting there, and then looking back at the beginning stages of ministry, and to see what God has done now and in us and through us and for us, it has been a great joy. I think about how I remember the first time we had an encounter in the church where somebody got upset and they walked out, and it was so devastating to us, because I can't believe, it was just unimaginable that somebody would get upset with us, but we had to realize, we had to grow from that, realizing that everybody has something going on within themselves, and not necessarily us, or it's not even necessarily the ministry, So, and it was at that moment that when God let me know that, then I was like, okay, I said, we're going to have those kinds of situations. You can't fall apart. You can't get upset, because that'll stop you in ministry when you stop and look at an individual. Really. You have to minister to them, understand that, different ones got different situations, and then you move on. Not that you move past them, and not, absolutely not. But I've learned all of that. I've learned so many things where God would start to talk about how, he would give this, he would allow our ministry to do this, or he would allow this to happen, and to see it happening is just tremendous. It's just a blessing. It really is.
I was just thinking about the fact that you were really literally here from the beginning, and to see how God has blessed your life, see how God's blessed the ministry. Part of the reason we're doing this is because everything is about a journey. And sometimes you have the ups and downs, and what you're showing and what Pastor talked about is those ups and downs, but you have to keep going because you never really know what God is doing. But the fact that you're sitting here, because when I first came, I remember that. The fact that you're sitting here, you own your own business, and you don't have none of those issues, is that right? She don't have none, come on, y'all. She don't have none of those issues anymore. I want you to talk about, again, and for whatever reason I have to go back to this, I just really want you to talk about accountability. Regardless of what level you're on, whether it be somebody who is a lay member, maybe they don't ever grace the stage, but they're a part of the ministry and God's put something in them. Please talk about accountability.
Accountability is crucial. I remember, for those of you who don't know, International House of Worship, we go on our fast. We have a corporate fast on Tuesdays, okay? And we have been for many, many years. Accountability don't only start with the congregants. It's from the head on down, you know. So I remember, Pastor and I, this is nothing that we said that we were going to do, but like I remember going to Philadelphia. I had to drive up there. I was by myself or what have you, and it was at that time I was going through the physical challenges. Whereas like if you get hungry, then sometimes your body will start shaking or whatever. Then I had called Pastor. I said, well, Pastor, I said, I just came off of a fast, you know, an extended fast. It was my own fast, you know, something that I had done by myself. And I said, so now, you know, I need to eat, which was probably like on a Tuesday. And I wanted to let her know that I was going to be eating that Tuesday, even though I was on the road to Pennsylvania. But accountability, I wanted her to know that this was Tuesday, and I was actually going to be eating. I was going to put something in my mouth, eat, you know what I mean? So I wanted her to know that. And so, and she does the same thing. There might be times when she's on a bus and it's a Tuesday, or maybe she might have to take medication where you have to take with food or whatever the case is. She'll call me and say, co-pastor, she said, I'm going to have to, you know, eat something because I got to take this medicine or whatever. So if accountability is here, you know, then it should, that the people should understand, I'm talking about the congregants, everybody else, they should understand how crucial it is, you know, with them. Because if you don't, there's an essence of rebellion when you're not accountable. Think about it.
What does that really look like and what doesn't? Because some people, when they think rebellion, they think automatic resistance that you can see. But
all right. So for instance, if Pastor Dawn says, International, we're going to go on a fast on every Tuesday until 3 o'clock. The person that purposefully decides, I'm going to eat my breakfast, is purposefully deciding, I'm not paying attention to my pastor. Simply put, for whatever reason. So that's how it is. It's a rebellion.
What impact, like this is another direction, we're out here now. What impact does that have on you and your journey and what God is doing in your life? If a person is just constantly, they're saying they're submitted to a leader, but they're just disregarding everything, the order of the house. It's not about control, not that, but this is what the precedence is, but they're not listening. So how does that look, you know, with their life?
Oh, okay, I know if you're talking about as far as us as leaders, how does it look for us, or how does it look for the people that decide to do that?
How does it affect them, I should say, if a person is just constantly not following the mandate of the house, and what does that do in the person's life? Or does it do anything in the person's life?
It absolutely does. Let me say this to you. I'll say the scripture, and you can almost hear it. Rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft.
And I'm asking you to explain it, because sometimes people, they get caught up in thinking when the pastor says this is what we're going to do is control, but it's not. Mm-hmm. It's all about order.
All about order.
But the fact that you stayed accountable and in order with the house, look where it has gotten you.
Amen. Amen. Because, and so what happens is, if that is in you, it's a level of disrespect for one, really. Because your purpose is saying, I'm not going to do, you know, you might not consciously think it like that, you know what I mean? But that's exactly what it is. Rebellion is as a sin of witchcraft. So if that's inside of the vessel, then what else is there? Yeah.
Lord, this is a whole other conversation. We got to end, but I just thank you so much, co-pastor, for doing this, for sitting up here. I'm still looking at her shoes, y'all. Sitting up here with me and interviewing, and I pray that everybody heard something that will bless them. Come on, let's give it up for our co-pastor.